The crisis shelter had 4 beds. The board has 12 seats. The city of Concord has, for 10 years, written the exact same check, $12,500 to the same nonprofit, Thrive. The city's police department helps run that nonprofit's biggest fundraiser without a contract, for free. The police department's own website has promoted that nonprofit as a primary public resource, without disclosing that the nonprofit was, at the time, chaired by the then mayor's wife, Tara Reardon. The former mayor's lobbying firm is a documented sponsor of that nonprofit's fundraiser. And in 2020, the city manager quietly stopped writing the nonprofit's name on the budget line. That's where we start tonight, friends. Not with the money, with the renaming, because you don't rename a line item unless somebody noticed something. So welcome to the Gracie Gatto podcast. Now pour yourself something stiff. We're following the money, and next week we're going to follow it out of town. So, 1978, Concord, New Hampshire. A nonprofit is born. The Merrimack County Task Force Against Domestic Violence. A noble name, a regional name, a name that tells you what it does, who it serves, and where, right? So fast forward to fiscal year 2013, same employer identification number, 020342222, same P.O. box, same mission statement, word for word, and name, a new name on the masthead. The Merrimack County Task Force Against Domestic Violence, doing business as the Central Crisis Center of New Hampshire. That's the first rename. Because remember it, because there's going to be more renames in this episode. And every single one of them happens at a moment of heightened scrutiny. So now let's talk about who was at the table when the Merrimack County Task Force Against Domestic Violence became CCCNH. The chair of the board at that time of the rebrand, Tara Reardon, also known in Concord political circles as the wife of then Mayor Jim Bully. So Tara Reardon, the mayor's wife, brought in City Councilor Jenny Kratovic in 2014 to the board of directors. So Kratovic went on to become the treasurer, executive director, and chair. Kratovic is not just a Concord City Council member. She serves on the Fiscal Policy Committee, the Manager's Review Committee, the Public Safety Committee, and the Rules Committee. In other words, she's on all the committees that can steer money to the nonprofit and prevent ethics inquiries from going anywhere. Now, that's not a conflict of interest. That's a Mobius strip. But Concord, my dears, the conflict is also not new. It was engineered in 2008. The resolution. The year of our Lord, 2008, a new mayor takes office in Concord, New Hampshire, Jim Bully. And in that same year, among the first acts of his administration, the Concord City Council passes a resolution, a modest little resolution, the kind of thing that scrolls past on a consent agenda while everybody's looking at their phones. It's titled Appropriating the Sum of $189,000 for Police Special Duty Services. Now, on its face, this is procedural, boring, blah, 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 blah. But buried in that is the legal architecture that will, over the next decade and a half, allow a nonprofit that was chaired by the mayor's wife to receive free police labor at its annual fundraiser. So let me read you the language slowly, okay? So I got a quote here, and I'm reading. Quote, whereas the police department provides special duty police services to Concord businesses, not-for-profits, government entities, and other utilizing city police officers and equipment on a fee basis. On a fee basis. 3 words. Read them with me. Let's do the bouncy ball. On a fee basis. So, The 2008 resolution, the foundational document of how Concord police officers are loaned out to nonprofits, explicitly states that nonprofits pay a fee for those services. Compensation, direct fringe benefits, administration, all of it, on a fee basis. So here is a simple, falsifiable question. If Central Crisis Center, which changed its name again to Thrive, has been using Concord police officers, and they have, then where on the Form 990 is the line item showing payments to Concord PD? I've read every one of these returns cover to cover. There is no line for Concord Police. There is no contract. There is no, whatever. There is no fee schedule. Which means one of two things is true. Either Thrive has been paying Concord PD off the books, which would be a 990 reporting violation, an IRS problem, and a real story. Or Thrive has been receiving Concord PD services for free in direct violation of the 2008 resolution that established the program in the first place. So what was the quid pro quo or return favor for this arrangement? There is no third option. But friends, we don't have to speculate anymore because the city of Concord has told us which option it is in writing on their own website. We'll get there. But first, let me tell you about the other line item the city quietly renamed. This is the part where I introduce one of the real heroes of the story. Now, her name is Stacy Brown. She's a sitting Concord city councilor, a good friend of mine for Ward 5. And she did something nobody else on that council apparently thought to do. She asked for the budget detail, going back 10 years. Stacy's background is in military intelligence. For 10 consecutive years, the Concord City Manager has recommended an annual appropriation to the Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire, Thrive, the exact same amount every year, $12,500. Now, nothing budgeting costs the exact same amount for 10 years running. Like health insurance goes up, salaries go up, postage goes up, the price of air goes up. But the city's contribution to a domestic violence nonprofit frozen at $12,500 year after year after year, like a fly in amber. It's not a budget, it's a signal, a handshake, a placeholder. And here is the part that made me put down my glass. In 2020, the city manager stopped using the words crisis center in the budget line. Same amount, $12,500, same recipient, but renamed to, quote, Rape Domestic Violence Social Service. Now, you don't rename a budget line item that's been on the books for 10 years unless somebody noticed something. You don't go from Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire, a specific identifiable nonprofit, to Rape Domestic Violence Social Service, a generic untraceable category, unless somebody somewhere decided that it was too specific. And here's the part I want you to chew on, friends, because the rename happened in 2020. But the original line item, the $12,500, started rolling in mid-2010s when the chair of that nonprofit was the wife of the mayor. By 2020, she wasn't the chair anymore. By 2020, she wasn't married to a sitting mayor anymore. So the rename wasn't protecting her. So who is it protecting? And for the record, in 2016, the city of Concord rolled out $271,780 in a funding to a whole bouquet of social service agencies. So whatever this architecture is, CCNH, Thrive, isn't operating alone. It's at the center of a constellation. Now, speaking of renames, let me show you another one. A smaller one, quieter, sneakier. The 2014 Form 990, the second year CCC&H used its name, included a Schedule O. The Schedule O was part of the tax return where the organization gets to explain anything unusual. So here is what Thrive CCNH explained verbatim. The executive director is paid through a leasing company, therefore the organization does not issue a W-2, and that's a quote. A leasing company, the executive director of a domestic violence shelter, federally funded, city-funded, IRS-recognized, was being paid through a leasing company. And this is legal. Professional employer organizations exist. Small nonprofits sometimes use them. Fine. But it raises a question, what does the leasing company's margin look like? And who owns it? What is the actual flow of funds from Thrive's 990 line item compensation to the executive director's bank account? The 990 doesn't tell you the leasing company by design is opaque. And the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017, Thrive quietly switched the Schedule O for that year. And it reads, quote, during June 30th, 2016, the staff were leased employees for part of the year. However, during the entire year ending in June 30th, 2017, the staff were employed directly by the Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire. Translation: we stopped doing that weird thing. No press release, no explanation, just a quiet accountant-mediated pivot buried in the supplemental pages of an IRS form. So what changed in 2016? Two things. Thrive stopped using a leasing company, and the city of Concord rolled out $271,000 in new social service agency funding. There are no coincidences in spreadsheets. Okay, so let's remember the question I left dangling earlier. The one where Thrive was paying Concord PD for special duty services or not paying and violating the 2008 resolution that the entire program is built on. I promised you the City of Concord has already answered that question in writing on its own website. I would like to read you now an excerpt from the document published at concordnh.gov. It's titled, and I want you to savor the perfection of this, quote, 9-month status report. It's a report from the Concord Police Department to the Concord City Council on the status of the department's annual goals. It is, in other words, the police department's reporting on itself to a council that includes a sitting board member of Thrive about what the police department has been doing all year. Here's what the report says, verbatim. Let me clear my throat. Quote, the domestic violence unit officer attended training on exploring the sexual offender and physical abuser. The officer also assisted the city prosecutor's office by attending trials and protective order hearings with victims of domestic violence, assisted the Crisis Center with the first Walk a Mile event held in Concord, training new volunteers at the Crisis Center on police response to domestic violence, an assessment protocol, and actively worked with victim advocates and the Crisis Center to assist domestic violence victims in receiving any services or support that they may need. That's the city's own document, the city's own paperwork, the city's own admission. A Concord police officer assisted the Crisis Center with the first Walk a Mile event. That's the city saying on its own website that a sworn officer of the Concord Police Department helped run a private nonprofit's fundraiser. The same officer trained new volunteers at the Crisis Center, paid by the city, to train volunteers at that private nonprofit. The same officer actively worked with victim advocates and the Crisis Center. Oral, ongoing relationship. Nowhere in the report, nowhere is there a mention of a fee, a contract, an invoice, nothing, a memorandum of understanding. there is no compensation flowing back to the city for any of this work. So, which means the question I asked earlier has now been answered. The city of Concord has been providing free police services to a private nonprofit. At the time, chaired by the then mayor's wife and treasured by a sitting city councilor in direct violation of the 2008 resolution that established police special duties services on a fee basis. And then they published the violation on their own website. Laurel and Hardy movie, I'm telling you. But wait, because there's a twist. I promise. There's a twist. If you go to the same concordnh.gov website and pull up the Concord Police Department's budget detail, also a public document, you will find a line called, quote, Special Police Duty Services. This is the line that tracks how much money the city of Concord allocates to the police department each year to run the Special Duties Services program. Taxpayer money out of the general fund to fund police labor for nonprofits and businesses. In 2013, that allocation was $198,526. In 2014, one single fiscal year later, that allocation jumped to $351,769. That's a 77% increase in a year. Now, per the 2008 resolution we read together, this program is supposed to be self-funding. The nonprofits and businesses that use the police labor pay fees. Those fees flow back into the general fund. The program nets out more or less to zero. That's the theory in practice. So Thrive, the nonprofit chaired at the time by then mayor's wife, didn't pay those fees. The 990 showed no payment to Concord PD. The city's own 9-month status report admits in writing that police labor was provided to Thrive for free. Which means when the city allocated $352,000 of taxpayer money to fund this program in 2014 and Thrive used the program without paying its share, the rest of Concord's taxpayers picked up the tab. Every person in Concord who paid property taxes in 2014 paid a tiny piece of Thrive's police bill. They didn't know they were doing it. Nobody told them. The 9-month status report doesn't break it out. The budget detail doesn't break it out. The 990 doesn't break it out. It's a subsidy of one specific connected nonprofit funded by people who never voted on it. Let's walk a mile in her shoes. So every year, Thrive holds a fundraiser called Walk a Mile in Her Shoes. You've seen it. Men in red heels walking down Main Street, raising money for survivors of domestic and sexual violence. It's a fun event. It has real and meaningful purpose. I want to be very clear about that. Because what I'm about to tell you is not an indictment of the men who walked or the people who donated or the cause. It's an indictment of the math. And the math ain't mathin'. Fiscal year 2016, Walk a Mile gross receipts is $51,816. Direct expenses, rent and facility costs is $607. Other direct expenses, $48,921. Total expenses, $49,000. Net income is $2,288. So a nonprofit holds a fundraiser. The fundraiser brings in $51,000. Blah, blah, blah. The venue rent is $607. The $48,921 goes to other direct expenses. What is the other, Karen? The IRS Schedule G doesn't require an itemized breakdown. Nobody until now apparently asked. A $51,000 fundraiser that nets $2,000, 4.4% Girl Scout cookies have much better margins than that. But now, I want you I want to show you the flyer. Walk a Mile in Her Shoes flyer, published, distributed, archived on the Crisis Center website. It announces the event, October 5th, 2016. It thanks the sponsors. It thanks the wedge sponsors. 3 wedge sponsors are listed on the flyer. So there's Merrimack County Savings Bank, Coed Sportswear, and Dennehy and Boley. Dennehy and Boley. The lobbying firm belonging to Concord Mayor Jim Boley, the husband at the time of this flyer in 2016 of Thrive board chair Tara Reardon. And friends, I want to slow down here because if this had been a law firm, this would be a conflict of interest story. So lawyers sponsor charities all the time. It's a tax write-off. It's good PR. It's how American philanthropy works. But Dennehy and Boley is not a law firm. Dennehy and Boley is a lobbying firm. A lobbying firm. Lobbying, for the listener who hasn't spent enough time at the the State House, is the commercial practice of being paid to influence government on behalf of paying clients, companies, trade associations, and industries and nonprofits. The state of New Hampshire requires lobbyists to register, to disclose their clients, to disclose their compensation, because lobbying, unlike philanthropy, is a business transaction in which one party pays another party to talk to government officials on their behalf. So when a lobbying firm sponsors a charity that depends on state and federal grant funding, VAWA money, VOCA money, HUD money, the $12,500 from the city of Concord, the sponsorship is not just philanthropy. It is potentially a business relationship dressed up as philanthropy. The question I would like to see asked by someone with subpoena power, since I don't have subpoena power, is this. Has Dennehy and Boley ever been a registered lobbyist for Thrive, the Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire, the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, or any of the other social service nonprofits in that constellation? If yes, the wedge sponsorship is not a gift, it's a receipt. If no, then we have a lobbying firm donating to a charity in a city where the firm's named partner used to be the mayor, where the firm's named partner is married to the charity's chair, where the charity gets a $12,500 annual allocation from a city council that includes one of the charity's own board members, and where the police department helps run the charity's fundraiser for free. Either answers its own story. I have not been able to find the lobbying disclosures yet. They're public records. They exist, but I'm still looking. If anybody listening has done the homework or wants to help with it, I'm really easy to reach. I got a podcast. So let's talk about the empty house. Thrive has lovely offices in Concord. Banners around town, posters on telephone poles, a whole visual brand identity that says, we're here, we're present, we serve. There's also, according to the multiple eyewitnesses, a sign on the door of those offices. The sign says, we're short-staffed. Please call the 24-hour hotline. If you're keeping score, a nonprofit secured a federal community development block grant. Taxpayer money channeled through HUD, channeled through the city, voted on by a council that includes the nonprofit's own treasurer to build out new offices. And the new offices have a sign on the door that says they don't have enough people to staff them. The offices are both fully operational and completely empty until someone opens the door, at which point you discover the staff are on the hotline, which means they're not even in the office, which means what were the offices for? added to a list of questions sent to the city and the New Hampshire Charitable Trust Fund. I'm waiting. But here's the part of this that nobody talks about. If you go to concordnh.gov, the City of Concord's official taxpayer-funded website, and you navigate to the Domestic Violence Unit page, you'll find a list of additional resources. And that list is short. 3 entries. And here it is in order. Thrive NH. And it gives a daytime telephone number, hotline. And after that is Adult and Elderly Services, Financial Assistance for Victims of Violent Crime. That's the order. Thrive NH first, above the state of New Hampshire's own Adult and Elderly Services, above the State Victim Compensation Fund. The City of Concord, using its own official taxpayer-funded public-facing emergency information page, is driving crisis traffic to one specific nonprofit. The nonprofit that was until recently chaired by the former's wife. The nonprofit treasured by a city councilor. The nonprofit sponsored at its annual fundraiser by the lobbying firm. That's not a public resource page, that's a referral funnel. And nowhere anywhere on that page is there a disclosure of any of these relationships. We looked. So let's talk about the receipts. Okay, let's leave the empty offices and the renamed line items and the 4% fundraiser aside for a moment. And let's go somewhere quieter, somewhere where most people never bother looking. The New Hampshire Secretary of State's campaign finance database. Yeah, we went there. Oh my gosh. So in the fall of 2017, a Concord City Councilor was running for re-election. Let me introduce her properly because we're going to hear her name again and again and again. Councilor Amanda Grady Sexton, at large, Concord City Council seat, and importantly, chair of the Concord City Council's Public Safety Committee, member of the Rules Committee, member of the Fiscal Spending Policy Committee, and a member of the City Managers Review Committee. All the same committees as Councilor Jennifer Kratovic. Now, the Public Safety Committee is the city body that exercises oversight over class. Anyone? So the Concord Police Department, the same department that, per the 2008 resolution, provides special duty police services to nonprofits on a fee basis. The same department that has for years helped staff Thrive's annual fundraiser without a contract on file. So Councilor Sexton runs for re-election in 2017, and like every other candidate for an office, she files an itemized list of campaign contributions with the state. That list is public record. You can look it up, because guess what? I did. It's 3 pages long. But most of the names on it are exactly what you would expect for a Concord City Council race. Neighbors, local businesses, a small few dollar donations, $25 here, $50 here. Rennie Cushing, the late state rep, kicked in $25. Steve Dupre, the well-known Concord political fixture, and her nonprofit's landlord kicked in $200. So normal stuff. But 2 names on that list. 2 names made me sit up. The first one is dated October 17th, 2017. Concord address, $300, and the name is Dave Vincenanzo. David A. Vincenanzo, partner at Nixon Peabody LLP, one of the most prominent attorneys in the state of New Hampshire, currently representing, among many other clients, survivors of the New Hampshire Youth Development Center in litigation against the state. He donated $300 to a Concord City Council race, a municipal Concord race in a city of 43,000 people, from a partner at a Manchester and Boston-based M-Law 200 firm. that is not a normal donation pattern. But Vincenzo is not alone. 13 days later, October 30th, 2017, the campaign records another contribution. Portsmouth address, $200. The name, Stephanie Shaheen, daughter of United States Senator Jeanne Shaheen. Now, I want to be careful here. Stephanie Shaheen is a public figure in her own right, former Portsmouth City Councilor, former candidate of New Hampshire's Executive Council, businesswoman, advocate. Her donation is hers, not her family's. But the pattern, two prominent New Hampshire political donors from two of New Hampshire's most powerful political families and firm networks dropping money into a Concord municipal race within 2 weeks of each other is worth noting. And the reason it's worth noting is this, because most Concord City Council races attract local money. People who live in the district, people whose lives are directly affected by zoning and snow removal, garbage pickup, blah, blah, blah. The Public Safety Committee chair seat in Concord in the fall of 2017 attracted statewide attention, which raises the question, what was about to happen in Concord in 2017 and 2018 that made the Concord City Council Public Safety Committee chair seat so suddenly interesting to attorneys and political families from outside of Concord? And I'll give you a hint. It rhymes with witnesses to a grand jury investigation at a private boarding school. But that's a story for next week. So let's talk about the cliffhanger here. So let's step back, friends. Let's look at the whole thing. A nonprofit rebranded in 2013, chaired at a time by the mayor's wife, treasured by a sitting city councilor, funded annually by a $12,500 city allocation that nobody ever increased and nobody ever decreased until somebody quietly renamed it in 2020. After the chair was no longer the chair, after the mayor was no longer the mayor. Operating under a 2008 resolution that says nonprofits pay for police on a fee basis, except the city's own 9-month status report admits in writing that the police have been providing those services for free. A police department whose annual taxpayer-funded allocation for special police duty services jumped 77% in 2014 to $352,000. Well, one specific connected nonprofit used the program without paying its share. An annual fundraiser that nets 4% and was sponsored at least in 2016 by the mayor's private lobbying firm. Federal HUD money for new offices that have a sign on the door saying they don't have any staff. A city website that drives all of its emergency domestic violence traffic to one private nonprofit with no disclosure of the relationships behind it. And a city councilor who chairs the Public Safety Committee, oversees the department, doing the uncompensated work, votes on the annual appropriation, and quietly takes campaign donations from one of the most powerful law firms in New Hampshire. That is the local franchise. But here's the thing, friends. That same city councilor, Amanda Grady Sexton, has a day job. A day job you haven't heard about yet on this podcast. A day job that is not in Concord. A day job that is statewide. A day job that puts her at the center of the literal center of legislative lobbying and legal infrastructure that the entire network we just spent this last half hour mapping out depends on. Her day job is at an organization called the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, the NHCADSV, and Thrive, the nonprofit at the center of this episode, is a member of that program, of the coalition, which means everything we just talked about, Every free hour of police labor, every renamed line item, every campaign finance receipt, every empty office, every wedge sponsor isn't a Concord story. It's a case study. So next week on the Gracie Gatto podcast, we follow the money right out of Concord. We follow it to the State House. We follow it to Nixon Peabody. We follow it to Shaheen and Gordon. We follow it to the Attorney General's office. We follow it to a 2018 settlement and a 2019 court order and a grand jury report that to this day is sealed in a Merrimack County file cabinet somewhere. We meet an associate attorney general who told a prominent lawyer in writing that he had a conflict of interest twice. And we watched what happened anyway. And we asked the question that nobody in Concord and nobody in the State House has ever wanted to answer. Who is actually being served? And who is getting paid? So until then, ask your city councilors for the budget detail going back 10 years. Look at the campaign finance database. Notice the line items that don't change. Notice the names that suddenly do. And remember, friends, when a charity has 4 beds and 12 board seats, the board is the product. I'm Gracie Gatto. This was the Gracie Gatto podcast. Please stay curious and be agents of chaos.